never train and kids juggle Israel.
Sorry.
That's Annie. Don't know why I cut her off.
So, probably up to triple. Video stakeholder relationships as well. So, that's what someone has to several organisations. I'm trying to change as I'm chair of the council finishing in February. Oh, did say take the so just do some succession planning. Yeah, no. Yeah, no, I missed that. I don't mind a little M. I don't mind. I need it. Well, I don't know, 0.6 M.
All right, are we on? Yeah. Microphone's on?
No.
Push the button. Just press that button as well. Everyone?
Okay, awesome. Okay, you carry on. All right, welcome everyone. We'll start with a statement of acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge this land that we meet on today is the traditional lands of the Ghana people and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Ghana people as the custodians of the Greater Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Ghana people today. All right, item 2 is the attendance record. We are all here and welcome to Councillor Wilner.
Thank you.
As first audit risk committee meeting, and there we go.
Enjoy.
Everyone's here, there are no apologies, no motion to grant leave of absence, and no leaves of absence, and no non-attendance. So, all good there. Item 3, are there any declarations of interest? No, none noted. And item 4, business arising from minutes, this is a special meeting, and there's no business. Okay. All right, so the purpose of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting today is to discuss the budget report before it's endorsed or endorsed in principle for the purpose of community engagement. So I think I'll hand over to management to give a summary of the FY27 annual business plan and budget.
Where do I start? I miss everything. Those two I miss.
Okay.
That's it. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to share, took quite a disciplined approach with this budget with the view that when I presented to the council, it was really about getting the fundamentals of local government right rather than perhaps building new things that we would then code for is, for too long, we've had this practice of hiring a roller the whole year because when we needed it, we couldn't get hold of it. So we've taken a decision now to look at a 10-year schedule to reseal, to seal every dirt road within the town of Gawler, purchasing a roller, and then at the end of the program, we'll sell the roller and the grader, so that going forward we won't have the capital cost of the grader, we won't have the overheads of maintaining those pieces of plant as well, and our community will have a fully sealed network. It's quite really impressed with the team bringing that kind of philosophy through the budget process. It's predicated on I'll call it a minor surplus, $180,000. We've deliberately excluded the extra funding, so the growth recovery funding from that, so you get a true articulation of what our minor surplus is. If you include that, it's quite a healthy surplus. With the current fuel situation, we sat down and had a look at what impact that may or may not have on our budget. Our total fuel spend in the scheme of things is relatively minor, it's $120,000. So, and predominantly that's going to be diesel. So even a doubling, if that was a full year effect of a doubling, it's call it $100,000 problem. I think we could manage that within the current allowances without having to provide contingencies as part of the draft budget adoption. As the fuel products pertains to bitumen and road resume program, the way we'll manage that is, well, one, I'll just share what we're doing for this current year. We've actually gone to our supplier and locked in delivery of the program at the current pricing, rather than waiting for the cost escalation to come tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be a cost escalation point, so we've got that supplier to lock in current rate for the cost escalation, so that helps this year's program, which will flow through our position at the end of the year. We'll simply adjust our program, so just assume we're resealing 12 roads, we might reseal 11. That's worst case. It means we can manage the program without providing a cost hit to the budget. Obviously longer term, we'll have to analyse what that means if the costs are high, but for this budget, I think, I'm reasonably comfortable we can manage it without having to build in contingencies at this point in time. Is there anything else I should have mentioned there, Sharon? Just totality.
Not in their totality, but I just want to, just in case there's anyone listening online, the 90 is for the average, like for the average residential property. It's not 90 across all land uses. That is actually for residential, and that's based on an average property that is around about $620,000. So, the only thing that obviously the new growth revenue that we've actually included in the budget is based on around about 2% of revenue from new assessments. We're still early on in our valuation data, so as at week 2, and I haven't had a chance to look at the new any of the other data. So we're sitting around about 380,000, which is about 1.3%. So unlike last year, where we sort of inched up, pretty confident that the 2% of the rate revenue will be achieved because most of the new assessment impacts actually come later in the valuation file. The only other thing that we need to actually also take into account, which we haven't actually built into the budget yet, is obviously we do have some impact because of the boundary realignment as a result of we're taking on some assessments from Clayford, Barossa and Light, predominantly the residential or the residential properties, or the main properties are actually coming from Clayford, but we're also losing some as well. So we just need to work through what that impact is actually going to be. So the Boundary Commission is actually determining what the rate impact is on those individual properties, both ways. So we still don't know how that actually impacts us going forward. And I think that the value generators or land services have actually impacted, actually adjust our valuation data as well. So, but essentially we will probably be be giving a separate differential to those properties that have come over from Mayford, and what that differential is out of our control. It's actually going to be set by the Office of Local Government. So yes, I think you'll notice probably from an operating perspective, especially the new initiatives, they're very few this year. The big one is obviously the local government election, which is around, got a cost estimate of around $260,000 to actually run that election. And then the other one is the new amenities, enhancing the amenities of the town. So yeah, but as Chris said, it's pretty much like, so we've still taken the emphasis of our financial strategy. We always said that for this current term, part of the financial strategy will be focusing on that expenditure control and reducing the renewal gap, and that's formed the basis of this budget, and the revenue increase is actually in line with the long-term financial plan. So we've used that as the guide, and even while the operating surplus is slightly lower, but it's actually only very minor in relation to that. So yeah.
Thanks for that. A couple of questions in regards to the election coming up and that. Last one we got Sharp. They left out the Labor. I want to make sure that we're over that this time so we can actually count for it.
Yes, very good point. So we'll make a note. I don't know if they clarified that.
We have included a contingency, so
Okay.
so I think the original estimate was around about 220 or just over 200. So we have actually included a contingency. There's also some costs that we actually incur as well. So, but we've actually made a bit of an allowance as a just like based on that experience of the fact that the estimate that they actually provided us was $20,000 left for the mayoral election. So we did make a contingency for the fact that they may have forgotten the Labor cost. However, I could see that they were in the front page of the advertising today about the impact of wasn't mistaken, so they might not want to.
I've got just another question. Obviously, the fuel side of things is very challenging for everybody. I don't know we talk about research. And have we done any modelling on any other contractors, external contractors, that, you know, we've got a surplus of 180k, and at the moment 180k is not a lot of fuel sort of thing. So are we doing modelling on what other contractors that are engaged by us, what we could be facing?
Yes, certainly. So we have done quite a medium level assessment. Probably the biggest area of exposure, I think, is our waste contract with Norman. We had a discussion with Norman about their budget the other night. They were indicating reasonably high rise in our waste collection charge. We've asked Norman to go back to the table and rethink that. Still think your current waste charge is about $250, $54. I think as a minimum we're probably
so we've locked in the contractor for current rates, and we've got a year's worth of project to deliver. Or get a research program, sorry. Yeah, so we've locked in the contractor for the bitumen products at today's rates, so that we avoid the client tomorrow.
Yeah, so for the remainder of this year's program.
Oh, sorry, okay. So the remainder of this year's program, so that delivers that. I'm just sceptical on the contractor side of things. So them wearing the additional and not coming back to us and having the conversation later and how they were able to lock in that rate with their supplier. A little bit more around that.
So we were always going to incur a cost increase at 1 April.
Yep.
So that's just part of the standard cycle of the contract.
Yes.
Give them credit, they reached out to us and said, look, this is their lose. We don't know what the cost is going to look like post 1 April. We'll keep you informed, and then give credit to Dave and his team. They jumped in front of that and picked up the phone and said, look, can we lock in our rate now?
Mm-hmm.
And they give them credit, they agreed to that because their rate hadn't changed at that point. So it wasn't a situation of them absorbing anything at that point.
Yeah.
They were just helping us get in front of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's how that unfolded.
Yeah, okay. But if the material that they're doing the road seal on and their supplier, they're doing the road in the next couple of months, them honouring that rate may actually mean they're absorbing something.
Oh,
Yes.
maybe.
Yeah.
That's on them.
Okay.
I suspect they've stockpiled.
Okay.
Yeah. I suspect that's what's happening.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's, yeah, I was just, obviously,
That's a fair question.
in the industry at the moment,
Yeah.
the rise and fall clauses we might see in government project contracts that flow through just because of the uncertainty. And then if they start flowing through and that's the expectation, all of a sudden we're exposed again.
No, I appreciate that. And I'm Madam Chair, just share, and I don't know about our bitumen contract, but certainly the Norma waste contract doesn't have a standard rise and fall condition. So we're going to be in an interesting situation where technically we could tell someone to absorb the cost, but then we also want the bid to be done. So, you would expect you just in negotiation. Standard practice is you absorb some, we absorb some. Happy medium. So, in that situation, whatever the escalation is, you're not going to absorb it all.
Yeah.
But you'll carry some, that's for sure.
Just one thing to add, in relation to that current operating surplus, so we haven't actually included the supplementary road funding. So that current program ends at the end of this financial year. However, so if the federal government actually decides to continue that program, that will actually give us another $170,000. I probably suspect, based on the current position, and given that that's actually road funding, that we can actually either use from a maintenance perspective or a capital, like we're not tied to how we're actually doing that. So even though we treat it as operating, so that potentially is an uplift that could offset the impact of fuel prices going forward, both in just our general operations, but also to a degree in those, because we can redirect some of that funding to assist the funding of any roadworks projects that we've actually got as well. So there is that potential uplift of around about, and that 170,000 was based on what we actually received this year. So obviously there will be some degree of indexation from that perspective. So there is some potential upside that, but we won't know until May when the budget comes out as well.
Christine, questions?
Sorry. This is no longer. Yes, President.
Testing, yes, sorry. Just another question around basically the impacts of the Middle East war. We talked about costs and cost pressures. I was just wondering about any challenges on the supply chain side. Are you relying on inputs arriving in Australia that might not get here, and so you might have some capex rolling over but carried forward into the next year? So any concerns about being able to complete the capex program?
Might get David just to give us insights on that. Thank you, David.
So at this point in time, we're not expecting any, because we're not actually expecting any overseas delivery items. We were expecting one that is light bulbs around the 10 stationary development that were supposedly ordered and coming from overseas, and we found that there's been a breakdown in communication from the supplier, and we've forced their hand, and they're being locally manufactured as a result. So that was the only one that I'm aware of that we were getting from overseas, so everything else is locally produced as far as I'm aware.
What about the tiles?
Pool tiles in the future for the main pool, we may have to get from overseas. We'll work that through at the time, but depends where they come from, it depends which shipping route they take.
Okay, I'm happy a thing now. Really interested to see that you're going to purchase a drone, and that could lead to savings and improvements in efficiencies and all that sort of thing. I'm just wondering if any of those savings have been included in this budget, or are you going to keep them once you know more about what the drone can do?
Is that on?
Yep.
Yep. So where we know that there will be savings delivered through the program, we have actually built those in. For example, as part of the increasing the amenity of the town, essentially there are savings because we won't actually do have those contracted works out. So where we know what they are and they're tangible and we can quantify them, we have. And if they're not tangible or we just don't know at this point in time, we haven't actually built them in, because it's that question of depending on the timing and all that sort of stuff and how the usage of that.
So I thought that could be an upside.
Yeah.
And you go.
Do, and again about fuel. And so I appreciate your point. You said you made some medium-term analysis on diesel impact, but I guess if you took that a little bit further and thought about broader price increases from suppliers, and not necessarily from your input cost of diesel, but their input cost of diesel and flowing that through. I see the LTFP assumptions operate at a 3% increase, so I'm wondering if that's been applied, and so if you talk to that, please.
A good question. David, which will be taken into account there?
So as with any competitive tender price, it's up to the market at the time in terms of that response to those tender proposals. So all our program of capital works we've packaged up and we'll go to market and seek responses from the market around price. It's very similar to the road renewal concept. We look at scope to ensure we fit within budget. So we may have to reduce some scope to ensure we meet those prices if the prices are impacted and influenced by those inputs that you mentioned. So it comes down to that rationalisation of deliverable once we have gone to tender and are assessing those tender prices.
So, sorry, just to clarify, so you used 3%?
In terms of the CapEx program, we use a different indexation. Numbers escaping off the top of my head, but it's the local government index that we use for that one. I think it's 5% we've modelled that one on from memory, not the straight line 3, that's for general service and operations delivery.
I'll just add to that. So obviously, when we asked staff to do their budgets, which was in January, the war was not on the thing, and so we actually gave the parameters, and that parameter was around 3% because I suppose that was our indication at that point in time of what we actually thought the inflationary impact was actually going to be. So yes, the budget has all been based on a premise of this is what we're actually going to, as our CPI increase in our contracts that have those clauses. So because, you know, it's with any budget, you use the best information that you actually have at the time. So, and no one had foreshadowed that we were going to go to war, or the US were going to go to war at this point in time. So yeah, so it was 3% from an operating perspective. Obviously, that's 3% across on average. So yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Are we open to crazy ideas here? Because I see in the background it talks about the requirement to submit the budget between 31 May and 15 August. And I mean, I see you've listed some timeframes there of community engagement commencing 29 April. And I'm wondering if you've considered that extra runway in your legislative opportunity to submit your budget, and whether a bit of extra time gives you a bit of extra certainty in how things move.
I don't know if, so obviously the later we adopt it, the later we actually then declare our rates. So there is a direct revenue impact. So there's a funding impact as well. So essentially under the, you know, so from a legislative, so if we pushed it back to August or July, August, essentially then we're pushing back equally our declaration, like our rates notices, so from that declaration. So given that, realistically from our input perspective, I don't think that, like, it's not like that we use a lot of plastic products or anything like that of significance that would sit there and say that we're going to be severely impacted from a price at this point in time. So I don't know whether we would be any better off to do that, and whether that actually allows us the opportunity to actually increase the rate revenue from that we actually collect, because that's the other tension. Yes, we can have a better idea of what our expenses are, but it's that question on, does that tension also extend to the fact that we can actually say, oh, okay, well, we're going to increase our rate revenue by another 2% because we've got this temporary glitch that we don't necessarily know how long is actually going to be, and whether we can actually recover any, I suppose, any losses that incur at the start of the year across the whole year through operating costs. So, Chris, anything else?
No, that's a fair thought. My thought to add to that was there's no reason why during the consultation period we couldn't do it some more stress testing.
Yep.
So I think that's not, you know, we should do it anyway. But in answer to your question, I do what I do.
So you maintain the flexibility, I guess.
Yeah, then we can come back to council, the community feedback plus our stress testing.
Yeah, I guess I think blip in the system is probably a good way to describe, not that we know at this point in time. I think more staying the course a little bit and realistically having a lever that we can pull on dropping some of our deliverables if we do get affected by something in the future. I mean, HDPE pipe, for example, is going to be really, really hard to get in the industry. Tomorrow it goes up 36%. Now, depending on how much stormwater and sewer we're doing, that's how much we look at, how much that affects us in the meterage that we would need to buy, and that will then be a market test at that point in time. And I think the process that you roll through on the delivery of that, I think at that point in time you're going, hey market, we're going to do a stormwater job. It is now an extra $25,000 than we budgeted, and then we relook at it. Because I think it is a fair and reasonable thing to relook at, and then $25,000 is the biggest hit we take on HDPE products. $40 million company, maybe that's something we can weather the storm without trying to get that if we're talking about a $1 million contract that is now sitting at 3.6, it's $360,000 more, I think there's a different conversation to happen. But you know, trying to guess it at this point in time, I think we do need to just stay the course and drop off the unnecessary projects, because as we know, our CapEx is talking about extending our borrowings, not funded directly from rate revenue as well anyway. But that doesn't give us the license to just extend borrowings because of a blip that might self-correct. So I don't think any thinking is off the table, but I do like the idea of saying, hey, you know, our road resale program, maybe we don't do as many kilometres, not meters. I think that's understandable. I think that's a message that is responsible. And we're going to see a construction industry start dialing back deliveries as well. We're not going to be the only ones doing it here at Call Council. I think the worst story would be, hey, we're actually not liking how volatile the landscape is in the economy at the moment, so that 4.2% we're talking about, we're going to do that 6.2, but war and Iran. I don't think that's very reasonable at this point.
I think over the last few years we've been applied some really good budget repair measures to claw back, because 5 years ago when I joined the Audit Risk Committee, we weren't in the strong position that we're in now, and because this is the best thing about being in a strong position with a volatile environment, you do have a little bit of flex. While if we were in a position that we were 5 years ago, you know, we wouldn't have much of an option. So, and the experiences of COVID, I think in volatile times you want to keep things consistent. You want to be able to let, you know, the ratepayers be able to budget and give them some certainty. And I think it's really good that, you know, the 4.2% increase is very palatable. And you know, ratepayers should be happy with that. You know, considering everything else that but everything else is they're going through. So considering, you know, we have seen some very, other councils have had some huge rate increases. So I think it's good. It shows that we're in a strong position, you know, and we don't know how long this is going to go on for. Is it, you know, is it temporary? Is it permanent? But at least it sort of provides, you know, some certainty in the short term, especially also coming into election period and everything else that's going to be happening this year. So that's just sort of my thoughts on it. But then, you know, I encourage, you know, council to make sure you monitor the position, and you have got the, you know, the means, the quarterly budget reviews to just keep checking in to see where, you know, fuel increases, you know, might be hitting the bottom line, and, you know, to make, you know, decisions accordingly as to what, you know, what can be done and what, you know, needs to be deferred.
And that's a good point, right? These budgets are describing essential services, so there's really not much opportunity to dial back on those, and it's the capital program that is more discretionary and, you know, not as held tightly.
Any other questions or comments?
I think, just to add to that comment, I think that realistically, I think it's potentially the delays in some of the new projects that would actually do. We would sit there and say, okay, well, if we have to sacrifice something, we'll sacrifice something that's new, as opposed to that renewal program, which essentially is funded through the rate revenue and that rate revenue increase. So we'll make sure that what we deliver is that we'll deliver. We do have a bit of capacity to deliver some of the new and upgrade stuff through some excess depreciation that we actually charge and all that sort of stuff. And it's just that assessment at that point in time as well. And obviously, there's probably a couple of projects in the new program or upgraded program that still gives us an opportunity to actually go and seek external funding from grant programs as well. So we'll continually look at whatever the grant programs are that come out to actually ensure that we can actually offset, I suppose, those new projects as well. And even to a degree, if there's anything space as well, that meets the funding criteria. We will always continue to do that. And our philosophy is to sit there and say, even if we get grant funded, we don't increase the scope. We actually just reduce the contribution that we actually have to make either through borrowings or and all that sort of stuff as well. So I think that will continue on as we go through, and then it will just be that question on what are the projects that we can delay that won't necessarily have that much of impact too badly. But I think the focus will still be on those renewal projects to make sure that they're the ones that actually form the priority.
Just to take, I guess, a little bit of an opportunity having our independence in the room. Some of the messaging that I think would be great to make sure that we get right, and you guys see it in other council areas as well, so just after a little bit of advice. I think we're doing some good work in relation to what our staff mix looks like. I know we've been talking publicly, and us as well, when we catch up, but around our staffing mix. I think what we're looking at the moment and opportunities that will be great to hopefully come to fruition is around, like our Birch Crew is a good example, where we are looking at our blue collar work base, which is something that we identified our fundamental services, just a little bit, and we need to sort of do a little bit of catch up. And there's an opportunity to bring in a couple of staff members and merge them with another one and form this team. And this team is going to be able to react proactively to some of the things that we maintain every year and save us on the contracting costs to be able to bring it in-house. The other exciting opportunity that I know we'll keep on looking at, and it's not locked away or anything like that, but it is about Northern Parklands, for example, where Northern Parklands becomes a state government asset, but then we act as their contractor to help maintain said asset, which actually goes from costing us, whatever it costs us per year to do, that we then charge and get paid for. But we do need the staff capacity within that blue collar space to be able to have the opportunity. But it is a balancing act, because staff's the easy one for community to turn around and rightfully question to say, you're spending $15 million this year, which is 40% of your budget, please explain. And I think again, we're looking at these staffing roles and certainly constantly reviewing and the like, but I guess a bit of the messaging around how local governments operate, what's good to see in our staffing costs here, what you're sort of seeing in relation to what we've done in the past and how this might be a little bit different. And then also, performance-wise, I think we've just managed to give a little bit of a chart for each of the elected members that sort of shows a staffing number in comparison to population, which has stayed pretty steady, to be fair. But if we're trying to show quality improvement, the staffing number per population doesn't capture the improvement, because I think the staffing mix is what we're looking at. So it's not necessarily a population decrease, it's population better use in layman terms. Now that's a bit of a loaded question. But any insight within the industry, this is a unique business. We obviously apply a lot, we provide a lot more services than your average business that might have 141 staff.
Yeah.
But some operate at a loss, some operate at break even, some operate at minor surplus.
I think it's a good question, because historically people thought that a contractor is more cost effective than having someone on the books. If you're paying someone a salary, you're probably on costs as well as for that person. However, as we've proven in last year's budget result, this year's budget result, that the savings were gained by not bringing in contractors, but getting staff within the existing staff
see one of the larger capital projects is the Gawler Pool renewal program, and I'm just aware that some other councils have had some pool projects that have.
This is a renewal, not a replacement.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess I was just querying if you've taken, you know, those. I think they made some estimates and found that they weren't really accurate. So just wondering if you've taken those lessons on.
Also, it's a good observation. It's a good observation. The key difference is what we're doing here is we've got a kind of a fundamental renewal. So it's literally pulling the tiles off, sealing up some joints, and put the tiles back on. There's no new work, new expansionary work. So the risk of this price escalating, I'm going to say zero, but it's certainly much, much less than a lot of the aquatic projects we've seen around the traps just lately.
What I also like is a question without notice for either Mayor Shanks or Councillor Lorna or Chris. Just that I attended one of the sessions with the elected members talking about the budget, just the overall, you know, consensus from elected members on the budget this year, and whether everyone was in agreement, so were there any, you know, projects that haven't been included. Because of, you know, provide a summary on that, that would be good.
I can go and then you can add, or I
Do you like to talk? Or
I like to talk. I like to talk. I don't love to talk. I'll give it my best.
I guess general consensus to me has seemed good, but not in the way of tick and flick good, if that makes sense. So I think the right questions and the right conversations are flowing through. And the reason I asked the staff question is because we keep on getting a little bit stuck up on that. There's probably, it's not a majority of elected members, but it is good to try to make sure that we are clear in our messaging. And I think even with your feedback there as you were talking, I was thinking actually this might be an even easier process than I thought. I need to get population numbers more or less as an overall estimate to say, hey, when we were operating with 139 staff before and X amount of contractors, that meant this, which is a cost of that, which we've got all that, but trying to give a bit of a population number, so by employing these two, we actually avoid contracting these five. And simply put, there's some messaging there that I picked up, but sorry, I digress. But some of the concerns that are coming through are the standard sort of concerns, but I think they're healthy. They're not, we're not seeing any outlandish sort of comments coming through. I think there's a general understanding. I think some of the questions are flowing through offline as well as within meetings. There doesn't seem to be any gotcha moments at this point in time that I've noticed in the past, where we're reading reports going, hang on, we thought about this, and that's, you know, not throwing stones at all. I'm just saying the understanding, I think, is better. I think information briefings are working well in the space. And then just we had our special council meeting to get it to here, and I was really adamant on making sure that the conversation flowed, and I have to go in one or two ways. But I thought it went well. I think the right questions and the right conversations were had, but we do have a healthy scepticism underlying it, if that makes sense. Yeah. Is that fair?
Oh, that's fair.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. Probably a lot of it also is the messaging, the common messaging across the board of what we're actually trying to achieve, how we do it, and how we're selling it, for a better word, to the actual community as well. So I think we're a lot more better online with what's actually going on. So yeah, it's going to count that. It shows sum it up quite well.
That's the political sphere. I was focused on perhaps one enhancement. I think we made as an administration to help out the community, and that's we went to great. A lot
administration that the Audit Risk Committee recommends to Council that the draft FY26, I think we've got to review ourselves there, budget set out the financial statements contained in attachment 1B endorsing principles for the purpose of community engagement, the draft FY27 annual business plan and budget. Do I have a mover? Christine, seconder. Ben, all in favour? Carried unanimously. Okay.
Full close.
Yep.
Just in relation, so we do have a session next Tuesday night for the opportunity for the audit committee to actually, I suppose, give this feedback to the council in person as well. So
Yep.
and that sort of stuff as well. So just in relation to rather than it coming back through, I suppose, administration. So that session is scheduled for next Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
Which if you guys, some of you were there, it would be fantastic if they had any questions, because it's not just the rest of us
Yeah. So
saying the same thing over
and just providing that feedback and I suppose that general, assurance or non-assurance. I think it's a bit different from the messaging from a couple of years ago and that sort of stuff. So, but I still think it's important that the council actually hear it from you guys, as well as to sit there and say that you are, whether you are relatively happy or what your concerns are with the current budget or things that we should actually